on our agenda is the approval of the August minutes.
Could everyone please mute their
Here's
their microphones? We're getting a lot of background noise. Thanks.
Any changes or suggestions to the minutes that Sue sent out? No? Okay. Seeing none, we can move on. We can have a call for approval of the minutes then. Is there a motion to approve them and a second?
I move to approve. Second.
Great, wonderful, thank you. And then we have an opportunity for public comment, but I would be surprised. Sue?
Yes, actually, if we could go ahead and get, a count of all who would approve the minutes after we get the motion in the second. And then, if there was any that are opposed to it or abstain.
Good, thank you for your coaching, I appreciate it. All those who approve?
Approve.
I approve.
Approve.
Yep.
Great. Any
Looks like all
opposed?
approved.
Okay. Karen, you're good.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Is that enough, Sue? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Public comment? I don't know if anything was sent in to you, CJ or Sue or Heather. And I don't see anybody on here who's not affiliated with the CAC. So can we just move right on to the natural resources inventory? Great. So we have a couple of items that are associated with this. The first that I think we probably should tackle is the scenic inventory. And I think, Karen, you are going to bring us up to speed a little bit on some of the glitches. And Robin, I know you and Karen have been working together. So maybe you can just explain where things came to a standstill and some of the maybe.
Yeah, sure. I mean, since Robin's really working on that section, and I think I weighed in afterwards, I want to give Robin, an opportunity to speak first, and then I've got a little PowerPoint that I think probably is the best explanation that I put together.
Okay, Karen, your volume was pretty quiet for me, but
Oh, okay.
I think I heard you. There you go. Yeah, so I guess where I left this was that CJ provided me with some data that I was able to look at in a GIS system, but I think that the issue that we came to a standstill around is that although I can see the data, it was not apparent to me that the data were not complete or were not 5-star data. They are functional. The shapefiles that I got were fine, but I have not personally experienced most of these locations, so was not really able to see like what was missing or what was there without personally visiting these locations. So I had started writing something, and was working with Karen to conduct a view shed analysis, and we can talk a little bit about what that was supposed to be. But I think the main issue is just that I didn't feel great about continuing to work on it if the data were not something that Karen or others felt like were complete enough or not meaningful. Like for one of the examples that Karen gave to me was like a drainage ditch, which was not scenic. So I'm not sure how it ended up in there, but it wasn't apparent to me when I started working on it. So Karen was able to point that out to me. I did look through the Tompkins County Scenic Resources Inventory, and start writing some background about, you know, how many of them we have that are distinctive versus noteworthy versus characteristic at the different levels. So I started to read and understand that, but basically I'm just not sure about the quality of the data, and that's, I guess that can be open for discussion. It sounds like Karen has more information about that. But I'm happy to keep working on this and keep building up the text around the scenic resources if we think it will eventually get to the point where it'll be high quality enough to include. Just thought it was time to pause and really think about it.
Do you mean that it was like very anecdotal or something? Like some person said, oh, I think this is a cool place to look at something. And or what was it that about the data that you didn't like? It just didn't make sense, or did it seem very
I
anecdotal?
think I can, I'll be demonstrating that. So.
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, maybe Karen can talk more about it, but I'm looking at the original document. It's a 100-page document that talks about how they nominated them, documented these things. So it sounds good on the surface, but the best I'm able to do is just superficially look at it and say that it sounds good. And the photos that are presented as examples look very scenic, but and some of them may well be in this inventory, but there are apparently some points that are very questionable. So maybe Karen, you can give some personal examples. So she's just able to look at the locations on the map and know where they are. I don't have the experience living in this town long enough to be able to look and say, oh, the intersection of this and that road is not a scenic thing. So without going and checking them out. There was also another issue with the data where the numbering system didn't really seem to match the numbers that are in the numbers in the GIS table did not match the numbers in the Tompkins County document. So there were some issues with putting together the table based on that. So without getting too in the weeds on that, there were some issues with the table.
I think part of it too is that from reading through the beginning of the document, it looks as if they hired some outside firm to put this thing together, and it may not be reflecting a complete local viewpoint, although they did do surveys for sure. But I sort of am unclear on whether they did field test things, which is what I would like to talk about today.
Do you think that what I got from county planning was maybe not packaged well, or
No.
I mean, I wouldn't expect that honestly from Sharon, but I'm wondering, do you think it's worth it to reach out to Peter J. Smith and the consultants who originally did this project and see if we can get the original data, even if we have to pay for it?
No.
No? Okay. All right.
I've got a proposal. So.
Oh, well, okay.
I'm going to request a screen share. Okay. And host has disabled participant screen sharing. Can you give that to me?
Yep, it's all you.
Try that again. Ah, great. Give it a second. Let me know when you see something, because I'm working on an external monitor.
Let me see it.
You can see it? All right, I'm going to do this. So I'm going to go into presentation mode and just let me know whether that is enough. You there?
It's fine.
Excellent. Great. So yeah, at one of our initial meetings, I did express a concern that the data were possibly not complete, but I think getting the data from CJ and Robin allowed me to do a little bit more of a deep dive. And I'm lucky in a couple of ways. One is that I have been here for 30 years in Lansing, and there are also a lot of markers that they put down right in the Salmon Creek, Ludlowville, North Lansing area. So I was lucky in that respect to be able to just take a look from just from experience and having driven these roads thousands and thousands of times. So I did drop the data into the GIS, and because the data set did have the rotation perspective of where the views were being looking out to, I was able to really easily map those. And so that's for those of you who are not familiar, and I'm an environmental cartographer, so this is kind of the bread and butter of what I do anyway. This is the GIS ArcView interface, and behind that is a data table that has all of the information that the consultants collected. And what we're particularly interested in this is both the direction of the data, which direction is the viewer looking out to, and also what is the scope in terms of, is it a 360-degree view? Is it just looking through a narrow shaft to see the view? So this is on my daily walk. We're looking right here at the intersection of Salmon Creek Road and Lockerbie Hill, which I'm sure is familiar to some of you. And you can see, there are some fairly iconic views of the Salmon Creek Valley from up on there. But over here is this viewpoint on the road, which did cause a little bit of concern. That's the guardrail, which the point is pointing to. And when I saw that was the first one that I looked at because it was so familiar. And I just thought, well, I better look a little bit more. And so I did about maybe a half hour, 45-minute drive around, just looking at where the GIS told me the points were and then taking a photograph. So here we are a little bit further up Salmon Creek Road, closer to the county line, looking west, southwest. And it's a cornfield. I mean, I wouldn't call it a remarkable view. There's a lot of views like this. It's just it's a lovely cornfield. I'm sure it's a productive cornfield, but is it worthy of being in the inventory? I think because we can start with this data set, we can take off from there and assess whether this inventory actually serves our needs as a committee assessing conservation in the town. If we do go a little bit further south on Salmon Creek Road, again, this is not one that they picked out, but there are some pretty wooded roads. Is that a criteria? I don't know. So I went up out of the valley, east out of the valley, to the intersection of Brooks Hill Road and Holden to take a look. And this is not surprisingly a nice view across of the valley. There's a lot of distant views from here, which is nice. And then going up Lockerbie Hill, these are some of these more iconic ones. Looking down, again, distant views. I'm not sure that they put the point in the place that is probably the best viewpoint, but it's okay. But there are other places along the way, like I would consider that, a little bit further down the road, probably, a lovelier, more picturesque view. And that's a little bit further down the hill. Again, this distance views, a very sweeping view of the valley. It gets probably more sweeping and more majestic from other points, but they're sort of in the ballpark. Here we're going down Salmon Creek Road a little bit further, and this is just a little north of my house. Again, it's a beautiful view of a wide valley, potentially, one could argue, under development pressure at some point, although certainly not right now. Is that an iconic view for Lansing? I don't know, but something to think about. So we're moving south on Salmon Creek Road, closer to Ludlowville, and we're just a little bit north of the Red Bridge here. I looked at this point without the topo map on, but as you can probably imagine from what you can see there, this is a hogback that comes right down to the road, and that's what they considered one of the scenic inventory spots, and I would tend to disagree. But without explanation or their data, I mean, maybe there's some longer story there, but I kind of think not. I was a little suspicious. So we're now in Ludlowville, which John is the most familiar with, and this is a point that is pretty much looking across the street from the old schoolhouse road in front of Luntz Church, and that's the view right there. And Andra, I think that there are some really pretty views up by your house. I'm not sure if this, I didn't go up Lansingville Road, and I'm not sure if that is representative of it looking due east from Lansingville Road, but I suspect that you could probably come up with a really decent scenic viewpoint from up around your house. So I did go to this other one that is just a little bit south of Lansingville Road. And again, there's distant views. It's not particularly remarkable, but if you proceed a few hundred yards further down 34B, closer to the tall bridge over Salmon Creek, you get views like this. And, from my perspective, there's really no good reason why something like that shouldn't be in, but that is. So,
Are these all pictures taken by the county?
I took these pictures the day before yesterday.
You did?
Yeah.
But you're saying the points were?
The points were collected by the consultants to the county, and that was, yeah, and they collected those with precise latitude and longitude, so I can map those onto the software and find the points.
And Karen, this is Todd. Did they have associated pictures with their views, or just the points and the directions?
No, Todd, they have the pictures, from what I can tell in the in this 100 and something page report, is that there are a lot of viewpoints. They have another category of sort of super views where they divide them into noteworthy, distinctive, and characteristic. And there's only 5 or 6 of those out of the 66 that are in the Lansing set. And those that are considered the most noteworthy for Lansing are generally their views from Myers and Salt Point, and I'm not even sure if those beautiful views across the fields off of Trip Hammer Road in the village of Lansing are considered the most noteworthy. I think they're some of the most beautiful views, especially when the round bales are on them. But it was mostly lakeside views. Arguably, this is a pretty awesome view that we're looking at right here.
And Karen, you mentioned that Ludlowville Falls was not in this data set, which is arguably one of the nicest views to look at least, in my neck of the woods.
Exactly. And their criteria are that, I think they were mostly, it was a sort of a window shield survey that they did when they were collecting these data, but the criteria also include historic settlements, houses, and publicly accessible properties like that park. So, you know, one could argue in Ludlowville, the brick block, you know, perhaps as a you know, historic landmark, but that was definitely not, that wasn't included either. So sorry for the typo. I was thinking of CAD and I meant CIC. So, and this is, you know, I also just want to throw this in. I just threw these slides in to explain a little bit better what a view shed is. If that's not a familiar term, it just basically means if you're standing in a particular place, what can the viewer see from that spot? So this happened to have been a, you know, an analysis that I did looking at what the impacts of that the Cargill shaft was going to be and where you could see that tower from for some other work that I was doing. And this is view sheds are calculated primarily with attention to what the topography is, which is great if you're in sort of a scorched earth area, but it doesn't account for the trees. However, because we can approximate the heights of trees and we also have data, we can add the tree heights to the ground level and come up with comparative what the views to or from a place might be, regardless of whether it's leaf on or leaf off. And you know, it's a fairly refined analysis, but you know, it's not going to be probably to the parcel level necessarily. So this was just the Cargill shaft view with leaves on, and then with leaf off. You can see, you know, the pink there is not so visible with leaf on, and then quite a bit more with leaf off. So that's generally what a view shed is. So back to my proposal. So I did quite a bit of work up here in this zone 6. I divided the town up into, just ballpark, into 6 sectors. And my proposal would be that as a committee, and this probably would take an hour and a half maximum of anyone's time, that we all go and check these spots out. And I would be happy to generate maps for, you know, for each region. I think we can pretty much assume that the views here on the lake to the shore are why wouldn't they be good, right? But it's the other views that, you know, at a you know, 50,000 feet above the ground, you might not realize that, you know, we're looking at a guardrail. But once we get down to, you know, to the ground level where planning decisions are actually happening and environmental assessments are actually happening, I think that's where, you know, it would be the responsible thing to at least do a quality assurance, quality control run through. So what I did was make a layer for this view of Lansing with the arrows on it. And if you go to this tiny URL, it will open up a view in Google Maps, and you can look at it on your phone or on your tablet. And if you bring it into your own personal Google Maps, you can actually drive around, I think, with your GPS on, so you can get directly to that point, and the arrows will show up. They should show up, I think, on your Google Maps on whatever your mobile device is that you're using. So that's yeah, that's all I got.
One thing I'd be interested in hearing a little bit about from CJ is your experience with the value of scenic views in maybe other NRIs and how important it is for this information to be.
Well, that's a really good question. And it really depends on kind of where you want to head next. I know that that was part of some of the talking about things that you actually wanted to do with the natural resources inventory, right? It wasn't just created to exist in the ether and not actually be applicable. That said, the work plan that Karen is proposing would help if we were able to really ground truth these, could act as the basis for a scenic protection overlay district, which I know my understanding is that that this group would like to consider implementation of environmental protection overlay districts as one of the next pieces in the work plan. So I'm not sure if that.
I would be curious.
Exactly.
I would be curious, CJ, how does that get actually enforced or put into practice? Or, you know, let's say if somebody wants to build a big old factory in a viewshed area, what are the legal mechanisms that would, you know, would this have any bearing on that the town's decision to approve it or not approve it?
Yes, absolutely. So environmental protection overlay districts are a piece of zoning. So they would be integrated into the land use ordinance. It depends on your advice to the town board about how stringent these would be, right? Would they apply to any kind of structure? Would they apply to everything from single family homes all the way up to other types of uses? There are many, well, there are several communities who have successfully implemented environmental protection overlay districts that are extremely strict. And those have been, you know, upheld. So you're on good footing, especially with the comprehensive plan and especially the natural resources inventory, which almost acts as the CAC's comp plan, as it were, almost as, you know, not just an inventory of, you know, what's important, but also to help you kind of establish a work plan for what's next. And my understanding is from conversing with some town board members that there is interest in actually establishing these. And I figured that might be one of the next things that you might want to work on. So.
Right. And if we're all gonna physically go out and look at all these sites, do we need a system, I guess, to kind of categorize how important they are to us personally, so that when we all get together, it's gonna, you know, make some sense.
Yeah.
How we evaluate them, I guess.
And I was also wondering about like seasonality. I mean, there are some view sheds where the trees are just so vibrant in the fall, they're just out, you're just amazing. But then in the summer, you're like, well, that looks like all the rest of the view sheds. The other thing I was wondering about was okay, so let me back up a little bit. When I was out west, there were areas that just sort of said our view sheds writ large are spectacular. So anything that's going to distract from those has to not interfere with it. So that meant like if you were going to do clear cutting, you know, of a forest, you had to be someplace where from a road nobody could see it, for example. And so I think we're kind of getting into a nebulous area here where are we saying like every point in Lansing is a beautiful view shed and therefore don't put anything where we can see it easily? Or do we want to like find like here are the 10 iconic view sheds that we don't want to interfere with? And so I don't know how we split that. This looks like it's kind of in the middle where like a lot of places are just awesome, but just kind of maybe everything is.
Can I say a couple of things? I've been talking about taking some photos, and actually earlier this week I went out and took a couple of 100 pictures, and as I was in a lot of the same areas that Karen was just talking about. And by the way, Karen, I agree completely with all the things you were saying, except I have to say the first one, if you move 20 feet to the right, you're standing in the middle of the Lockerbie Hill Road Bridge and looking right down the creek, and it's beautiful. I don't know how exact those coordinates are, but that's an exception. A lot of the other ones where all the other ones you're perfectly right about. But as I was taking pictures, I began to wonder about this question that's just come up. What is this really for? What are we trying to do with this? And what are the things that make something worth taking? And is this just going to be a book of pretty pictures? We can do that, but I don't think that's what it's for. And this idea of getting the data relevant to an overlay, that seems like a really good, a legitimate, useful purpose. And so that seems to me maybe to be the organizing principle we should use. And if we do go around and look at all these places and or suggest others, I would suggest, as Karen was, a lot of alternatives to the ones that were in that list. But what are they really for? Somehow I think we have to come up with a way of thinking about this and criteria to go out and look at things. Otherwise, we're just looking for pretty pictures, which is fun, but.
Yeah, and John, I mean, I agree with you there too. I mean, I have similar questions honestly, about the entire NRI. Like, what is the utility of this document? Because it tends to be, I mean, it's great to assemble that information, but what's the actual utility?
Yeah.
So I would love to see something get incorporated into actual planning. Planning ideas or these overlay zones as just an example.
I would think that this is Dave, just that the photos would be a way of transcending the text of the NRI and getting to the heart of the matter and making people look at some of these and go, this is what we stand to lose if we don't.
I agree. That would be the right purpose.
And from that standpoint, I don't think we need a picture of a guardrail.
Right.
It's some of the best, views, and really just one example of some of the types of scenery we have seems adequate to me. It seems that if somebody's going to say they're going to develop something in some part of the town of Lansing where we haven't happened to identify a scenic view, but we have concerns, we could go out then and take pictures of it and bring that to the attention of the town board and say, here, I don't think we have to photograph the whole friggin' town and all the beautiful little spots, corners you might find. So
that's a very good point.
It's critical. I mean, we talk about scenic, it means like, what does it look like? So I think we're not trying to take pictures of places that might be, let's say, not particularly scenic, but vulnerable to flooding, or, that's important, but if we're talking about scenic, it's got to be beautiful. And so I really don't think some of these pictures we saw are, scenic. I mean, it's a judgment call, I guess, but we don't need 60 of those. I think we need a characteristic farm landscape, a characteristic roadway, woodland. I think we could narrow it down to like 20 photos rather than swamping people with a bunch of pictures. And if they pick the wrong ones to look at first, they might say, this is not a very scenic place at all. I'm not very worried about the environment here. I don't know. It's just, it could damage us as much as help us.
But David, I'm thinking that it sort of as John's pointed out, it sort of depends on what your purpose is. If we're doing a coffee table book of here's beautiful Lansing, then I could see a dozen pictures. If we're actually trying to catalog really iconic and beautiful views, of which there are many, because it would play into an overlay type of a district, then I think being more comprehensive is probably in our interest.
Well, given that, I think that does, make it that it's not only the most, we don't just take pictures of waterfalls and the lake from boats out on the lake shore or something, but that we do have some characteristic of certain types of natural areas and farmlands that we have. So I think we do need some, they may not be the most spectacular, as you say, coffee table book type pictures, but I think we do have to have in the mix some that are characteristic of certain types of scenery we have. But
This brings up an interesting point because, you know, we cannot catalog the entire town, but on the other hand, if we have a sort of reactionary response every time there's going to be some type of development, then I don't know if that's realistic either, because that would require people going out and taking photographs and then saying, oh, you know, by the way, there's some beautiful views there. So I guess I'm interested, Tom, in your perspective, you know, coming from the planning board, how valuable is it to have a proactive document that's as comprehensive as we can make it right now, given that, you know, we have limited time and energy? If we put some time into it to get it to be a little bit more comprehensive and say, hey, there are a lot of scenic views. Here are some examples. Here are the, you know, the 3 echelons of scenic qualities that we're, you know, sticking with, that have already been cataloged. Do you think that that would have a positive effect on the future as we interrelate with the planning?
I think that the planning board might be receptive to this. I think the idea of preserving iconic views would have some appeal. There are people on the planning board that certainly their eyebrows are raised whenever you are concerned about impacting individual property rights. So that's something you have to consider, but they also very much believe in mitigating any negative impacts on any development for the town. They really do want to mitigate impacts that are negative impacts. So I think if we did have iconic views or whatever you want to call them that stand out, I think they would consider that in reviewing a development. So I think it would have purpose. It would be useful to do.
I think there's a bunch of good deliverables you could get out of this. You could have the coffee table books, not necessarily a bad idea if you're looking to roll out some significant impediments to development. When you want to urge people to conserve, when you want them to really see what it is that matters, I think that could be really an effective piece of this. I think using this as part of the open space strategy, an open space inventory. The open space inventory is kind of one of the next pieces that it would be great for this Conservation Advisory Council to work on, which will include the watersheds and wetlands, you know, streams. Those we've already kind of cataloged in the natural resources inventory. But once you complete the open space index, you can apply to the town to become a conservation board, which will mandate your requirement in environmental review in type 1, well, in any actions, but largely type 1 actions. And then from there, I think that you could really start to get serious about doing, talking about how to fund the conservation and purchase of development rights for projects or for properties that are really high priorities for you, and really have a genuine conversation, you know, both at the county level with conservation funding and locally even with bonding, to say, you know, yeah, we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. These are really important things to us. And then finally, the environmental protection overlay districts and some kind of, you know, so you have all of these options available to you. It really just, where do you want to go with it? So I don't know if that was too much, but anyway.
Okay, and this is Todd. This is a question more for Karen, I think. It sounds like what you were showing us is that the view sheds are not a bunch of points with arrows. They're all those shaded spaces you showed us when you were showing us the view shed. So the view shed is actually like a whole bunch of land that you can see from some point and some vantage point, not
Yeah, and they provided some of that information. I mean, I think that, you know, where they have that, oh, it's a 360-degree view or it's a 15-degree view. And so that would be, if I was going to be, you know, really doing the mapping for, you know, for real, I would put those wedges on, you know, for starters, just to say, you know, if you're looking in this direction, it's really quite a lot more expansive to the left and the right of looking straight ahead. So they did embed. I mean, you know, they did a really good job of you know, in theory of how they set this up. It's just that you know, on the ground, I don't know, maybe they had interns who didn't have good equipment. I mean, it's sort of hard to know what the story was, because that the data were collected 15 years ago. And while I don't think that the view sheds themselves or the views themselves have changed a lot, certainly technology has.
And I have a question about process. I am perfectly happy to go out and look at the, you know, spots that you've marked on the, probably region 5 would be best for me. But let's say if I go to those spots and I ground truth those particular points, what would be the process for adding additional ones? Like, for example, Ludlowville Falls. Would I then need to take a coordinate and then some kind of bearing for the direction one should be looking in?
I mean, you could.
I feel I could do that. The width of the view, I'm not as confident of how I would estimate that.
Right, and I mean, I think that a lot of this could be just done sketching on a printout. You know, this is not going to be survey grade, but I think that, you know, as you know, John points out, yeah, maybe their point was off a little bit with the Lockerbie Hill Bridge, and, you know, of course that occurred to me as I was standing there, but it was a, you know, it was a flag for me. So I think, yeah, I haven't really you know, I wasn't really sure what the reception of the committee would be to this, and so I haven't given a lot more deeper thought about how to, you know, how to launch a, you know, to actually turn this into a, you know, a program for us to do. But it's doable. It's just a little bit dependent on the interest and if people want to claim areas.
I'm wondering about a couple of things. One thing I wanted to mention is that as I was out taking pictures, more and more came into my mind that what I was taking pictures of is people's private property, and found myself trying to avoid having pictures and all that sort of thing. And that's a whole area that I know nothing about. I mean, can I take a picture of somebody's field or across somebody's field down towards the lake, and we put it in a publication without getting permission? Or I have no idea about all those kinds of things. But you know, 90% of the beautiful views in this place, everything except from Salt Point and Myers Park, basically, or Ludlowville Park, are of private property. So that's one thing that really came into my mind. But the other thing, hearing all this, I'm wondering more and more whether rather than trying to come up with a list of a zillion specific spots and angles and things like that, maybe could it possibly make more sense to just identify areas, like, let's say, I don't know, the west, the end 2 miles of Lansingville Road as you're coming towards the lake, because there are a lot of nice views there, you know, or just to pick an example, or walking along the bird sanctuary between Brooks Hill and French Hill, instead of specific points and specific spots. And then we could have a characteristic photograph, let's say, to go with those. I found a really nice spot on Lansingville Road, for instance, looking down towards the lake that isn't on Karen's list. But in any case,
was that near my house, John?
Maybe you could just have 10 or 12 or whatever it turned out to be photos to go with these areas rather than a zillion little specific spots. I don't know.
Andrew's questions is a good one though, because the view from her house is awesome.
Oh, it is fantastic. I wanted to take pictures there, but I didn't.
Well, I give you permission anytime. absolutely, anytime. And as a town board member, I really like the idea of this, the scenic protection overlay district, if it has any oomph to it. Because I think then the planning board would have to look at that, I would guess. And we'd have to think pretty seriously whether or not we want to change any zoning or permit any huge development. So that and also what CJ said about the open space index, that seems like an awfully good path to go to, because then this committee actually has a lot of power. And I think they should. I think this committee should.
I think, Andra, also with the, consideration of making the scenic byway one of the overlay districts, this could also provide a lot of backstopping for that argument as well.
Yes, yeah.
So what do people think of John's idea about regions?
I like his idea. I
that
like the
idea.
idea that there's, I mean, many parts of our town are beautiful, just beautiful. But there are certain, I mean, the view from my house is spectacular, and I see the whole other side of the creek. And then the view from John's farm sees my side of the creek. I mean, there's certain places that are spectacular, and I think photographing those and describing them is a really good idea. I mean, so many people don't know anything about the part of town. I always used to say to people, you go out of the school and most people turn left, and yet an awful lot of the town is to the right. That's absolutely gorgeous. People don't even know it exists.
Andrew, are those views, and John as well, are the views as good from the public road, not just from, I mean, I know the view from from your patio is really great. If you get down to Lansingville Road, I mean, I think that's also to speak to that, am I trespassing? No more so than if you were in a car, which I think is really what, I think that's one of the parameters is public roads and public spaces.
Yeah.
That's what I was also thinking, is that, if a photo was taken from a public road and it captures some of a private property, that doesn't seem like it should be an issue. If someone comes down onto my backyard and is taking pictures, that's another issue. So,
Unfortunately, the backyard's often the best.
oh yeah, I would agree. My backyard's spectacular, but my dock is really cool at sunset. But anyway, I just think most people, would not have trouble if their house was captured from the road. Right? That's part of the. We have 134B is a scenic highway, right? Isn't it characterized as some kind of state scenic kind of blah blah blah? Yeah. So.
Yeah, and the views from our farm, you can get as good a view from the road as if I'm off in the field. It's open enough there that you can see right across the valley. And if you're on the other side from Anders, you can see over. And actually coming down Lockerbie Hill, there's the higher up you are on that road before you hit Lansingville, if you're looking across. Those are the best viewpoints. Obviously, the further down you go, the worse the angle is, and you don't get the same view. But there are definitely good views directly from the road.
That's true. That's partly seasonal. Right now, the trees block a lot of those views, unfortunately.
What kind of concerns me is that if we were to have a huge number of photos, and many of them are fairly ordinary, you can have some real backlash from homeowners saying, they just tried to make everything off limits for doing, a 2-story building or something, because they're going to dig up a photo somewhere, and yeah, it's got a guardrail, but there's some nice trees in the background or whatever. I just think we have to be, if it's scenic, I think scenic has a definition in the English language. I don't have my dictionary in arm's length, but scenic means, it's special. It can't just be a tree. Maybe these people who came and took the pictures originally from New York City and they saw a few trees and they were impressed. I don't know, but we all know what scenic is.
Could be.
So in the interest of moving on, I think we should make a proposal as to how to move forward. And we have some good ideas. Does anybody want to take a crack at it?
Let's go back to what Karen was proposing.
I like the idea of dividing us into districts, kind of sections, and making sure we have some examples from every section. At least that for sure. I'm totally, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And is it difficult to, if we focus on regions, does that make it really hard for a cartographer who's trying to pinpoint something on a map, Karen?
Say the question again, Karen?
Well, John had mentioned regions, and I think a few people were interested in that idea. But if we have regions, that means it's not a specific location on a map.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could draw blobs. That's a technical term. So,
Are we talking about the polygons of a view that's nice? Or are we talking about the regions that Karen divided up the map into for checking the quality?
I think we're talking about something that's larger than a point and smaller than an entire view shed on the map. Something that, like, for example, we were talking about the lower 2 miles of Lansingville Road as being quite scenic. And that way we are not getting down into the granular level, but we are still, kind of putting an oar in the water about the beautiful areas of Lansing.
How would I quantify that though? If I get, okay, so it's a polygon, not a dot. How does that get quantified? Like, let's say somebody wants to build a trash incineration facility, 10 feet off the edge of that. Is that okay? Like, if you're looking at a beautiful waterfall and just outside the polygon, there's a giant trash compactor. I think the view shed really more captures like what is visible from this point versus a straight down look at this is the nice view. So does that make sense?
Yeah, this is Todd. I sort of understood it. It was like everything that was viewed from the example that was just given. Anything you could see from the last 2 miles of that road are the view shed. So it's a whole line of points that encompass that whole 2 miles or whatever it is. So it's the things you could see anywhere along there.
I like that phrase, view shed. View shed sounds like a way to think about it. I like that.
Well, I think from my perspective, if I'm going to be, and I don't have to be, but if I'm going to be the point person for compiling the information that everyone collects, I think that there should probably still be points where the viewer is observing whatever this vista, long or short, is. And then information similar, it could be exactly the same as the way the data that we already have is set up. Just say, okay, I'm looking east and it's approximately a 90-degree span. So, you stand there, you look in the direction that you're looking in where the greatest view is, and you hold your hands out in front of you and you say, oh, okay, is that 90 degrees where my arms are, or are they 180 degrees apart? And you can tilt your body, and it doesn't have to be a whole lot more, technical really than that. But I think it's something like that, rather than drawing, blobs on a map, it might be that could be the most efficient way to convey the information. And then we can kind of take it from there. But I think for the first cut, why not find where those, assemble those points, and then we can sort through them and we can toss some of them out, or we can consolidate some. That's easy to do. But, I think probably first things first, and then figure out the details of how we're going to work on the open space inventory or the the overlay districts, I think we just need better data to start with.
Yeah, I just feel like from the pictures you showed us, you know, they used a very low bar for what they were
I agree.
taking photos of. So I'm just not sure that, you know, what we're starting from with that data is, it's a very low bar. So we really have to, I think, eliminate quite a few of those. It's my opinion off the top of my head. But
No, I agree fully.
It's a low bar, but it also ignores a lot of nice things. So this is in both directions.
exactly.
I'm hearing that people really do feel we need better data and that it might be acceptable to generalize somewhat instead of getting lots and lots of very specific points, that we could do this blob idea of regions. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, I bet it is. We used to. I think what Karen was suggesting is we start with the points and go from there.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
they can all be organized later, but if we identify the good places, then we can look with them.
Yeah, that's Tom. I think you summarized my, you know, that would be my preference, is to take the points and then consolidate them into whatever these blobs are, so that we have a sense of
That's right.
what we're seeing.
Uh,
That sounds good to me.
And eliminate some that seem superfluous, that just seem
Absolutely.
Right.
overreaching.
Right. And add things that are left out.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so as a next step, oh gosh, I don't have the screen share anymore, so I can, let me just pull up the map on my computer. So, Robin, did you say you were interested in the Area 5, which is just sort of the mouth of Salmon Creek and a little bit upstream of there?
I did, but I've pulled up your map and I don't see like the boundaries of those
Yeah, I didn't put that on there.
areas. But I could approximate the areas around.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I'm
I'll get working maps to everybody. I just want to see what kind of coverage we have, and so I can describe the you know, what's sort of up for grabs. The northeast side of the town, which is you know, on the Groton line.
I could do that.
Okay.
That's Tom.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Tom. And then south of there, there's a strip. There's a lot going on just along the eastern boundary of the town. So that's up for grabs. And then there's a zone to the west of there that's a lot of those views from Trip Hammer Road.
I could do the one below where Tom's going to do then on the east.
Great, that's wonderful.
When you say I can do, is this going out and going to the points and taking pictures?
Yeah, basically, because we're going to want to show everyone else what we've seen so that everybody can agree and evaluate them to tell whether it's good or tossable or what we want to.
Yeah, so both assess, you know, your best guess about whether it's junk or things need to be, you know, thrown out or nudged or moved, or, you know, and so both evaluate what's already in the inventory and then also add anything that you like.
But
So
if we add, how do we figure out its location?
I'll be giving everybody a topo map of your section, and you can just make a mark on it.
Oh, okay.
And you know, if you have a camera and you have your GPS on, you know, for your navigation, most modern cameras will embed in in the properties of the photograph. If you take it with the GPS on, it'll give the latitude and longitude of what where you took the photo, but it's worth doing one and testing it if you want to get that precise, but I don't think it's that necessary.
Hopefully our phones are going to give us enough quality, because that's all I have for a camera.
Oh yeah, no, the phones are great. I mean, the phones, I can, like it can accurately place me in my bedroom inside the house. So, and that's not even a new phone.
And then my guess is that John Greeley's offer still stands. Maybe we can match up some of your photos, John, to some of these points, or if you'd still be willing, you could go out possibly and take some more photos if we needed them. We can't put endless numbers in NRI, but it would be great documentation.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, the ones I took this week are mostly lousy because the weather was bad. It was hazy, and I waited till this week actually because everything's been looking so brown, and Salmon Creek has basically stopped flowing. It's a terrible time to take pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to think about how to best set this up probably over the weekend. And what I'll likely do is give everybody a blown up version of who wants to do this of that sector of the town, and probably a topo map and an aerial photograph of the area, which might help with hedgerows and maybe help you place things a little bit more accurately. Maybe house footprints, I think will show. So, Carrie, are you interested in the northwest corner of there's sort of a triangle up in the northwest?
If nobody wants to take it, I could do it.
What section is Lansingville Road in?
The two of you could share that, or that would be that same section.
Yeah, because that looked like one of the bigger sections.
You want to do it together?
I would
Yeah,
say,
I think that'd be a good idea. We could share that one.
okay, because there are right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points on the land, and all the rest of them in that section are from the lake.
Oh, we're on the lake.
Yeah,
Oh.
so there's not a lot, but
There's not a lot.
but they're the ones that you could add. So you would have that freedom to put more in or kick some out.
And I'd be willing to go out in a canoe and see what I
Okay.
There you go. Carrie will do the lake and I'll do the land.
okay. If we need to, we'll get together.
Yeah.
All right.
And so what that leaves is the area in the southwestern portion of the town, which is a lot of the largely views from Triphammer Road. And then I would just, whoever takes that one on, I will say that from East Lake Road going down into that the Leathers development, there's some really great views from there, which didn't get captured.
I can do that one if nobody else wants it.
Oh, awesome, John. I think we've got coverage.
Yeah, and if Andra and Carrie overlapped, I don't think it's a bad thing, because it would be interesting to see different interpretations of what the map is telling us to look at for these scenic views anyway.
Sure. What's our timeline for this?
I think the next month or two is probably fine.
Is that Karen?
Yeah.
If Karen's able to get us material this coming weekend, could people do it within the next couple of weeks?
Yeah.
I'm away next week, I'll be back the following week, so within 2 weeks, yeah.
So maybe set a deadline of a week before our next meeting? Or is that too long?
When's our next meeting?
It's early October.
Sure.
Great. And then Robin, are you still willing to work on the text for this section once we get our act together?
Yeah, I think, the text will include more, photo captions, map captions, an explanation of what a view shed is. The supporting text will make more sense once the data are there. And then obviously the table will change. So the table will have to have our new points that we are going to add, and we'll delete the ones that don't make sense. One thing that I struggled with is that the points don't have names. It's just, if I click on one, what does it say? Like point number 60. That, maybe Karen knows what's going on here, but that to me didn't match anything in the Tompkins County one. So where they're saying like, this is a point, let me just find an example. Cayuga waterfront trail or such and such. They're just numbers, and the numbers don't really seem to match up to anything. So I don't know if there's a better way to organize these, but so the table is just like point number 60. Here's a direction, here's a bearing, and a field of view, but it doesn't tell you like this. Oh, this is Sapsucker Woods looking at the lake. So it might be helpful to have some notes like that, but it's not necessary. It's just extra stuff, but that might help to understand what we're looking at, so that it's not just point number 60.
So a brief narrative?
Just a title maybe. So if you look in the town, the county one, one example, candidate number 10, this residential and agricultural lands in the town of Lansing create the backdrop to this roadside wooded view with the Cayuga Lake sandwiched between. It is found on Perry City Road, approximately 0.1 miles from its intersection with Route 89 in the town of Ulysses. It is a panorama. It goes on and on about how these views are so nice.
Robin, are those only is there a description for every one of the 500 in the inventory, or just the distinctive and noteworthy ones?
Let's
them all, because I don't think that we necessarily need our numbers to line up with the counties if we're adding and subtracting them. It's a basis to start with.
Yeah.
Sounds like some captioning title would be really useful as we collect information.
And we can maybe create our own code and the description of the code or something.
I would propose that we have figured out enough of what we're doing that we move on in the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
Had an opportunity to take a look at the NRI and get any comments that they had to Terry, because he was willing to continue taking those comments and integrating them. We also have before us, as of today, an executive summary from Dave Wolf, which I think is really useful.
Very recent edition.
Yeah, it's hot off the press. Do people have comments in general about the NRI or the executive summary?
One thing
Go ahead.
one thing I saw on the table of contents, like I was looking at wetlands, table of contents says page 36, and that's not where it's found. So I don't know how often that happens. I didn't go down through yet and look at how many other examples there are of that, but that was one I saw.
I think there was a typo in Creek and Gulf. I think it was Gulf Creek on the first or
Yes.
second page.
Yeah. Mhm.
If each of you is willing to just send an email to Terry, that's what he requested, was for us to send an email with any kind of comments like that. I also picked up some of those glitches.
I had a question about the UNAs, and there's a map that shows all the UNAs. It's like map 22 or 23. Do we want to include that? Because also in that section, it talks about, to keep landowners happy. We don't want some of this, we don't want public information out. So people are trespassing on their property or looking for rare plants in certain locations. So I'm wondering, should we include that map in
Well, those maps are public, Tom. Those maps are in every single library and in town hall office, and they're,
Right.
I think at the scale of that map for the entire town of Lansing, it's not as likely to be an issue. And I think that also those details about what plants or which of the dozen or so parameters were went into the nomination of that site as a UNA. There's just not enough detail to
Okay.
make it a concern.
I had two overarching questions. One was, is it appropriate to list all of the CAC members who participated in this? Because we all did. And if so, where?
Put it right up front in the document.
I thought too, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
With acknowledgements, yeah.
Okay. And the second is, I didn't see anywhere in the NRI where we listed properties like Andra Benson's that would have an ag conservation even on it. And maybe I missed that, but if somebody knows where that is in the document, or if we omitted it, that would be useful to.
That's what we were talking about with Terry about the open space part of it. Whether to include that open space index as a separate document or whether we wanted to incorporate that into the NRI. That was, I don't recall if any decisions were made on that. I remember talking about it. And
The open space or the scenic inventory?
this open space index would also include properties that were already protected. So that had conservation easements on them or were state land or town properties, things like that.
So why would we omit those from the NRI?
We don't have to. In fact, I think that was the recommendation, was to bring that information in, but there's no reason why it can't also be a separate standalone document called the Open Space Index, because that document is what you need to petition the town board to become a conservation board. So it doesn't matter which way you want to go, whether you want to include it here in the NRI or whether you want to include that as a separate document.
Okay, well, since we haven't made a decision about that, should we table that till the next meeting and then make a decision, or?
And it would also be helpful to kind of send maybe a few bullet points with some pieces of reading kind of on like thinking about the long-term conservation planning options that are available and just kind of refreshing our collective memory about some of the things that we could do.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's do that for our next meeting when we're fresh and we can think clearly, and that sounds good.
So I have a question. So are we going to include the scenic inventory in the NRI, or is So that's gonna really delay the issuing of the NRI. Is that right?
You don't have to, though. You could include that in the open space index if you prefer. I don't think it,
Well, what I'm
think
thinking is
because-
the NRI right now has a lot of fairly complete stuff, except for the scenic inventory and this open space question.
yeah,
And we could always make them an appendix on the NRI at a later date. The advantage of not adding them now is we could actually put out the NRI sooner rather than later.
yes, and if I could just speak to that, I'd say just a couple things. I'm hoping at the October meeting, you'll feel that the NRI is in a state where you'd like to see it referred to the planning board and town board for comments to start get that rolling and headed towards being adopted as an official town policy. And the second thing is, as far as the scenic inventory goes, I think it's fantastic to include it in the open space index because that actually has some elements of subjectivity to it versus the natural resources inventory is really objective and factual, whereas the scenic inventory and open space index are going to be based on more criteria, weighted criteria that are based on this particular council's insights and preferences, right? So I think you're really in a good place with just using the NRI as that factual basis and then building on that. And so I'll send some follow-up information to kind of help think about the timeline for what you could do with all this.
That's
TJ, there is a section in the NRI for protected open space, which are the two kind of conservation easements that I was able to find. I think you may have found somewhere. How is that? Is that different from an open space index? Because we do have a section about open space.
Yeah,
It's just
even in the summary I did.
Yeah, that's already protected open space though, and that's kind of the distinction. Is
so that
the
other one would be
area-
unprotected.
Potential.
yeah, or areas to try to emphasize or prioritize for protection, right? Versus
Yes.
ones that
Got it.
protected open space is more or less a fact, right? Like it's under a permanent easement,
Okay.
or it's state-owned lands, right? They're seen as protected in perpetuity versus the index, which is saying these are our really high priority areas of open space. What can we do to protect them, and on what basis does that make sense? What's the rationale for that? So does that?
Okay, got it. I guess since I have the mic, I'll just point out one more thing one more edit while I have the mic. There's an acknowledgement section in the executive summary and an acknowledgement section in the NRI, and they are not the same. Do we need both of those, or can we merge them?
This is Dave. I just threw that into the executive summary because I figured we needed something like that. But I didn't quite cut and paste, but I paraphrased what was in the original document.
So it's intentional to have it in both places, just in
I
case.
just didn't, I wasn't sure whether we wanted it in both, and I just thought I threw it in there. I don't know. That's totally not, I don't have a strong opinion about that.
Okay, well, just something to think about, I guess. I don't have strong feelings about it.
It's really just acknowledging, people who worked on it in both places. If someone only reads the summary, this way they would know who was involved. That's my thinking, but I really don't have a strong opinion about that.
Do you want to make a recommendation about that, Robin?
Well, I thought it was unintentionally redundant, so that's why I brought it up. If
No,
you
for me, it
think
was
people are only going to read the executive summary,
Yes, I think that happens a lot.
sure, maybe,
I
but
think that's going to happen
I
a
mean,
lot.
if the idea is to merge the documents, I might just fold those into the acknowledgements that are already there, but that's me being economical with words.
Now, my feeling is the executive summary would be, it's a standalone document that a lot of people would just pass around and spend like 10 minutes thinking about natural resources. Maybe half the town board, I don't know. For all I know.
So leave as is, or, because I think we do need to, if we're going to get the document sort of ready for the next step in October, we need to go ahead and get the executive summary incorporated into it.
Oh, I see. So you're thinking it's all going to be one document. At the front end is going to be executive summary.
That's what I would imagine. Does someone else have a different view of it?
I don't know. Yeah, some things I've been involved with, the executive summary is produced as a separate document, but it's totally just not how it's going to be distributed.
Seems to me the whole purpose of an executive summary is for people who aren't going to read the whole thing. So you got to put things in if you want them to know. I run into many documents with the executive summary at the beginning of the document, and then everything in it is said again in much more detail. That's the whole point.
Okay. I mean, I don't feel that strongly about it. I was imagining that it was going to probably appear right after the acknowledgements and therefore just kind of be similar, but not quite the same. For example, the same entities are not, you know, some of them are not the same. It's totally fine with me.
I shortened it a little bit, I think. I just shortened the acknowledgements slightly. I consolidated all the Cornell property extension people, for example.
Okay.
People can do it
because it's the executive summary, right?
Yeah, that's that was the thing I did the very last. So
I could go either way. I don't know where this exact piece of copy is going to go into this document or be separate.
and my only thought is that if it's likely to be, executive summary is likely to be separated and handed out to people who are never going to see the main document, then the acknowledgements should be in both.
I would recommend that we have the executive summary in the main document and just have one acknowledgement.
Okay.
That sounds fine.
I'm fine with that too. If for some other purpose it's separated out and handed out separately, you could always paste that in.
So in terms of getting feedback to David, do people want to just take a look at the executive summary as soon as they can? And then, you know, in the next couple of days, get feedback? Does that sound like that's an appropriate time frame, Dave?
Sure, yeah. I would just say that, you know, the approach there was keeping it very brief and mostly just a description of, you know, if you are, here's what you're going to find. Here's what's a description of what you are going to find in the document. And hopefully enough tidbits to say this document can have a lot of very useful information for me as a town planner or whatever. But, you know, it didn't go into a lot of detail, sometimes a few examples of some details of some particular aspects, but kept it fairly brief. I didn't do a thing of like, another approach would be really to do a real marketing job of how special Lansing, the town of Lansing is in terms of its natural resources. So I didn't like cherry pick, you know, and start out with some of the most outstanding examples of the natural resources. There's another way you could do it that way. But I think this is I did it as kind of pretty much following the outline of the main document and just describing the finding. So if people have a whole different view, yeah, we could think about that.
I thought you did a nice job. I liked it.
Yeah. Okay, so comment to Dave, and then Dave, do you want to send it to Terry? I think that's the pathway that we would take.
Okay.
CJ,
Yeah, after I'll wait a couple of weeks or something or whatever for feedback. I could do it sooner, but
Yeah, probably soon is good, I think, for this document. And then I think Terry's probably scrambling a little bit, but I hope there's still somebody on board who could make those changes and insert it, I think. We'll give them some time and then be ready to go in October. So we're
cut and paste into the main document.
yeah. So we're getting pretty close to our ending time. We definitely want to talk about next priorities for the CAC, but that we have been weaving that topic into the whole meeting tonight, and we'll keep it on the agenda for the next meeting also. CJ, I know you probably wanted a moment or two to talk about planning.
Sure, just any questions you might have about the planning report, you should have received that via email. So if you have any questions, let me know. Also, I think Carrie sent around the information regarding the solar presentation. The folks at Cuga Power Plant are going to be giving a public presentation next Wednesday evening at 6:30 if you're interested. You could watch on YouTube channel, it'll be streamed, or you can participate if you have Q&A by jumping on the Zoom link. It's kind of the hot news, I think. Yeah.
Great.
There's much more, but I don't want to
always
expound forever, but we should have some news soon about the Appalachian Regional Commission Power 2020 grant. So I think that's the most exciting news, perhaps, which is the installation of a dark fiber optic line that runs from the current terminus close to Cornell and Guthrie, past the airport, past town center, and all the way up the lake to the power plant. So we'll see. It was ranked fairly highly. So there's a new broadband committee, in case you're interested, and they are doing a lot of work trying to figure out how to negotiate franchise agreements, track down where this infrastructure is, because the providers are pretty tight-lipped about that. And so this would probably interest Karen, but trying to get a GIS, accurate GIS data on where this infrastructure is going to be pretty interesting. That should go into some kind of inventory for sure. Anyway, so yeah, if there's any questions about.
How much was the grant proposal for that?
It was just about $1 million.
Amazing. Because Chuck thought that this might be able to be done for what, like 4, did he say? So that could be a really good start.
Yeah, it's about a 17-mile dark fiber line, so it wouldn't be sparked. So the idea would be that probably a nonprofit would be able to install it for that kind of money. But I really understand how much a priority broadband is, and the town's really making some efforts to get a lot of high-speed internet here as fast as possible. So fingers crossed. Our timing couldn't have been better. We applied. Well, we didn't apply. I begged Tompkins County Area Development to apply on the town's behalf. A federal grant is a huge undertaking with a lot of administration, auditing, and things like that. We just really don't have the capacity for that. But the great thing about this is that it would be continued to be held in the public interest and the public good. So it's a really virtuous cycle of having this kind of initial dark fiber line installed by a nonprofit, run by the area's economic development agency, and really create just more and more access throughout the town. So fingers crossed.
CJ. Well, thanks to everyone for all that you're doing, and I'll call the meeting to a close.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Hope I don't need
Great
to
work.
take
Great work, everyone. Thank you so much. It's coming along
Okay.
very nicely. You guys really done a great job. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, back.
Good night.
Thanks to everyone who did
Thanks,
some-
everyone.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Hey.
Bye.
Okay. Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Oh, hanging in
How you doing,
there.
Sue?
Oh, dealing
What's going on with baby?
yeah. Baby has, her trachea is collapsing
Oh no, what about the medicine?
and they didn't put her on medicine for the trachea problem, but she also has, oh, we're still live.
Oh no, I stopped everything, didn't I?